So Dianne is our reporter on the field covering the Oscar Pistorius trial. Dianne, let's start with what happened today. It's turned out to be quite an emotional day in court for Oscar and the witness, Michelle Berger. Let's start with Berger first. Barry Rue continued his cross-examination of her, and she broke down in court, in the course of the day. What did you make of Rue's line of questioning and of Berger as a witness?
I think that Berger, throughout the 2 days that she testified, was quite a strong witness. She stuck to her story despite attempts by Rue to try and rattle her. I mean, he was trying to look at every little detail of the evidence that she gave, even going down to the level of looking at particular words that she used. At one point, he was even doing a comparison between her statements, her statement that was given to police after the shooting, and the statement that was given by her husband, saying that the statements were so similar, it actually seemed like the police officer who had done the statement, someone identified here as a Captain Van Aert, that he had actually done the two statements while looking at the husband's statement and then essentially copied what the husband had said into Michelle Berger's statement. She vehemently denied that this is what happened. She said that she told Captain Van Aert what she had experienced on that night. She said that she had heard screams coming from Oscar Pistorius' house, and she was convinced that Reeva Steenkamp was in danger. At the time, of course, she didn't know that it was Oscar Pistorius' home. After she had gone through this grueling cross-examination where every little word was being picked on, Gerry Nel, the prosecutor in the case, then questioned her. And it was at that point that she actually broke down. It was almost as if she was just overwhelmed by the fact that it had taken so long. And his cross-examination was very short. The question that he asked at the time when she started crying was, what were her emotions when she was giving the statement to Captain Van Aert? And that seemed to be sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. Initially, she looked like she was trying to not cry, and then the tears just came. There were some tissues in court, and the court interpreter who was sitting next to her then offered her some water, which she drank. And I think now then at that point decided to wrap up his cross-examination. Oscar Pistorius was also crying in court. There was a point where his defense mentioned what I think will later on become some very interesting testimony to come from them. They say that they have some medical experts who will be testifying that Reeva Steenkamp was brain damaged at the time of the shooting. So the point of bringing this in was to basically indicate that at a certain point she could no longer have screamed because she wouldn't have been able to, essentially.
Yeah. Just going back to Michelle Berger and her evidence, there was a point where Judge Masipa even gave her sort of guidance on how to answer questions to get her out of the dock quicker. Was it because they could sense that she was getting quite emotional or flustered, or what did you make of that?
Well, it seemed like there was some sort of breakdown in communication between her, Michelle Berger, and Barry Rue. He kept on asking the same question over and over again. I think he was trying to get her to make a concession of some sort, that maybe what she thought she heard wasn't necessarily what had actually transpired on the night. And she was reluctant to say that. And he even said that she doesn't want to make any concession, even if she thinks that it could possibly help Oscar Pistorius' case. Throughout the day, he had been indicating that she had made up her mind already beforehand, and he also asked her, what prompted you to give this statement? Is it that you believed that Oscar Pistorius' version of events was not correct? So he was really trying to sort of push her to say at some point that yes, actually it could be, or that there could be something that you said that would be that was correct. She refused to go down that route, and I think that was where there was quite a lengthy exchange where he was saying, But what I'm asking you is this, and he'd ask the question, and she would then say, give an answer, and he would not be satisfied with that and ask that same question again in different words.
Yeah, it just seemed like it was quite long-winded and drawn out, and at a point you actually wanted it to just, come to some kind of conclusion. It was also kind of like the first time we've heard details of the extent of Reeva's injuries. I mean, we just spoke about the severe head trauma and brain damage. What was Oscar's reaction to this kind of testimony, evidence?
Yeah, I must say it is a bit difficult to see any expression on Oscar's face from the angle that we are sitting at. But I know that people that were watching the live stream on site and also watching the news channels were able to see that he actually started crying at that point. It was quite sudden that this information was brought in. I mean, here we're talking about cricket bats and gunshots. And the distance between houses, and then all of a sudden Barry Roo brings in this information about the extent of Reeva's injuries. They even read a portion of one of the police statements, which I'm sure we'll hear more on as the trial continues. It indicated that with a particular shot, and I think it was shot number 2 or number 3, Reeva must have fallen over. One of the shots missed her, but it was shot number 4, if I remember correctly, that would have hit her in the head and resulted in brain damage. And the point that Mr. Roo was trying to make, Advocate Roo was trying to make, was that if Michelle Berger heard her screaming after the last shot, that couldn't have happened because she wouldn't have been able to scream. So I'm sure it's something that will come up for argument later on in the case, particularly with us hearing more expert testimony. And it seems like the defense is really going to be banking on their own experts to counter whatever it is that the state is saying.
Yes, I think you're quite right in saying that the trial did get off to quite a swift pace, with the state calling their first witness, which was Berger, and now, as you say, Roo basically, just laying out the facts in front of the court with regards to the injuries and the bloodied cricket bat. Yesterday we saw a lot of activity outside the court, international and local media, trying to secure their spot to get visuals of Oscar and the family coming in and out. What has the mood been like today?
Today, I must say, has been a bit less frenzied than yesterday. I think partly because it's been raining, since the early morning. A number of the news gazebos were actually unable to stay up because of the heavy rain. So I think to a certain extent that also played a role. Also, the time when court ended yesterday there was a lot of more traffic in the street outside. There were children who had come back from school. There were buses going past. And now with it ending around 3 o'clock, there's a lot less activity. The media contingent, international and local, is still quite large. There seem to be fewer cameras at court today. But I think that also partially has to do with the fact that it has been raining for most of the day. What I saw was a lot of the camera people huddled inside the main corridor, just outside, actually quite close to where I'm sitting. I'm sitting in one of the corridors in the court building, but just outside the courtroom itself. And a lot of media, the camera people, were standing around waiting for Oscar and his family to enter court and to exit. When he left today, he left with quite a number of police walking out with him. We watched them strategizing how they were going to take him out of the building, talking amongst themselves and talking to Oscar and his legal team. At lunchtime, they actually took him through a rear exit, not through the front where he had entered. So there is, I think, a concern for his safety, particularly as a result of what happened yesterday, with all the people rushing after his car and him and his legal team struggling to actually get into the vehicle and get out of the court area.
Okay, and Dianne, we also, at the end of before court could adjourn this afternoon, Charles Johnson took the stand, and he's Michelle Berger's husband. Can you just sum up for us summarize what he said in his evidence in chief.
Yeah. Well, Schallberger, to quite a large extent, he's saying he's backing up much of what his wife had said, that they were asleep on the night of February 14, 2013, Valentine's night, that night that we sort of all remember, and that they woke up, and he's also saying that he woke up to the sound of a woman's screams. It's a critical point, I think, that the state will try to push, because with that family saying, or that couple saying that they are convinced it was women's screams, the defense has been trying to say, well, could it not have been that it was Oscar Pistorius that you heard screaming? Because they are saying quite clearly that they heard a woman scream, then a man scream for help, then I think a woman scream again, and then they heard gunshots. What the state is saying that Oscar was the person screaming throughout, and then that the gunshots that they believe that they heard were not in fact gunshots, that they were the sound of Oscar trying to break the bathroom door using a cricket bat. Now, the defense obviously is still going to cross-examine Charles Johnson, but at this point he has indicated that he agrees that he heard gunshots, first of all, which is the same thing that his wife said, and that he was woken up by a scream. And he's also indicated what happened afterwards, that he didn't know it was Oscar Pistorius' home, and that he believed that it was a domestic violence incident, which I think something that the defense will have to question him on, because they are obviously saying that this is an accident, and that you can't have that sort of connotation of domestic violence. So tomorrow morning he's expected to continue with his testimony. Where he left off, the prosecutor hearing now was taking him through the point where he had given his statement to police, but then things ended. So tomorrow we're expecting that we'll pick up once again at how he came to be giving his evidence to police. Today he said that the reason that he decided to give a statement to police is because he felt a moral obligation, because he believed that basically the full story wasn't coming out in the bail application with the evidence that was there at the time. What was being said then was that Oscar had screamed for help, and there was no indication that initially there was a woman that had screamed before Oscar had screamed for help. So, very critical issues about the order of events, which could prove the state's case in one instance or prove the defense's case, depending on how well they're able to argue these points, and also to what extent they're able to discredit witnesses for either side.
Yeah, and Barry Roos also made it a point to dig into the argument that, the burgers were like just over 100 meters away from Oscar's house, and he was questioning how they could have heard those noises so clearly. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's going to be a very critical point. I mean, he's saying that they were actually 177 meters away. He's also saying that at the time of the shooting, Reeva was in a bathroom which was locked and the window was closed. So he's basically saying, how could the burgers have heard her screaming if she was in this confined space? The opposite version that he's offering is that Oscar had gone and opened the doors of the house and screamed outside for help, and that's actually what they heard. But Michelle Berger yesterday and today quite adamant that she believes that it was a woman's voice that she heard. And a second witness who actually testified for the state, another neighbor, Estelle van der Merwe, also indicating that she believes she heard a woman screaming, and she said that there's a great difference between a woman's voice and the voice of a man, that a woman's voice has, and I think she used the word different, she used something to
higher pitch.
Higher pitch, yes. Level.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. So I mean, I think that will be part of what the neighbor's evidence will be quite critical to the state's case, because quite honestly, nobody else was in the house at the time to have known what actually happened inside.
Okay, thanks for your insights, Dianne. We can touch base tomorrow and you can shed more light on the court proceedings. Thanks, Dianne.
Thank you. Thanks, Sash.